So ladies, it's been about 6-7 months since I last did a devotion for both of you. And frankly, I just didn't have a whole lot to say. I really didn't feel an overwhelming need to produce a devotion. And I guess with all the stuff that we've been through here in the last 6 months in the United States, with the rioting, COVID-19, China's wonderful gift to us, and then of course the debacle and really the stealing of the election in just the last month or so. I was so consumed with all of those things that I hadn't really gathered my thoughts or been able to, but I'd like to send you another devotion here, and I titled this one, Being Still. And it's taken primarily from Psalm 46, verse 10, and it's the first half of that psalm. And here's what it says, Be still and know that I am the Lord, that I am God. And this reminds me of about the time that Elijah went up on top of Mount Carmel, and King Ahab and all of his officials were there, and all the false prophets of Baal were there. And this was really the showdown between the God of Israel and the false gods, false prophets of Baal and all the entourage that were gathered around them. And you recall that Elijah had the servants pour water on this big wooden altar that they'd made, this big colossus of wood. And then all of a sudden, he called down fire from heaven. And before everybody, the fire consumed the altar, which was made of wood, which had wood on it, which had been watered down. And it was just unbelievable. Nobody could mistake that the God of Israel was who he said he was. And you recall that afterwards, all the prophets of Baal were put to death. And keep in mind, too, that the prophets themselves tried to ignite the altar, but they couldn't do that. So it became very apparent that the God of Israel was who he said he was. And about a day after this fantastic event, Jezebel, through her husband obviously, orders that Elijah be pursued and that he be put to death. And Elijah, who had just stood in this unbelievable show of force that illustrated beyond a doubt that God was on his side, found himself running for his life. And all of this is within 1 or 2 days of this unbelievable event. And so he ends up in this wilderness area and in this cave, or the area of this cave. And it's there that God says, all right, I want you to set yourself up because I'm about to pass by you before this cave. And we've all read the account. There's a big fire, earthquake, big wind, all these things which you'd naturally equate with God. But after each of these, it's said very succinctly that the Lord wasn't in it. And it's not until the very end when there's a still small voice, and the Lord is in that. And that reminds me of Psalm 46:10, which I've been thinking about really in the last few days. Be still and know that I am God. Know that I am the Lord. Know that I am in control. Know, as Christ said, that not one hair falls from your head that my Father does not know about. And of course, I've had a lot of hairs fall from my head. But the point that I'm trying to make about all of this is that so much of the time today, right, with all this audio and visual and even all the stuff that goes on in our churches, and I'm just going to say it, we need to get away from some of that and just be still before the Lord. And I'm sorry to say that often takes pain and suffering in our own lives, loss, to where we finally begin to shut the world out and just come before the Lord. And it's often during those times. And I believe that Elijah had that time on that mountain when God speaks to us in that still, small voice. And that voice can take many times the form of just an impression, which is like very obvious. It's like, oh yes, that is what the Lord wants me to do. Oh yes, he does have this situation under control. And I guess my advice to both of you is make time consistently so that you're willing just to turn the world off, even stuff in church. Because sometimes churches don't help in any of this, right? With just all the stuff going on. And you get so caught up in the social system, even in the church, that you're not willing to just sit back and experience the still, small voice of the Lord. That's essential in our lives. Don't forget that. God bless you both.